Benita Pedersen, it's a pleasure to have you here. Firedupforfreedom.com is Benita's website. And this is an opportunity today for us to really talk about the Coutts 4 that you know a lot about and is a very important issue for all of us because there are 4 men that have been detained for 2 years without a hearing. Talk more and let people know what's going on with all of that, if you would there, Benita, please.
Yes, there are 4 men. The date they were arrested was February 14th of 2022. The date they were charged was February 15th, 2022. And so there's a special event happening across Canada, February 15th, and this is happening at courthouses across Canada. We've got lots of cities signed up already to help these 4 men. Their names are Christopher Carbert, Anthony Olienick, Jerry Morin, and Christopher Lysak. And what we intend to do on February 15th is distribute flyers very similar to these. And what they do is these flyers tell the story of the Coutts men. They talk about how there's all these issues in our justice system. But what I like the most about these flyers is that they don't just talk about the Coutts men and the sad situation we're in here. They also talk about the things people can do. There's a whole list of items that people can do. There's these calls to action. One of them is actually write letters of support to them. They love receiving letters. And there's some rules, of course, about sending the letters. You can't have any stickers, and apparently you can't use colored ink. It has to just be black or blue. That's it. No red. It's not allowed. Standard envelopes, but they love letters. And obviously some other things we can do is writing to our elected representatives. That's a big one. And of course, spread the word. And so on February 15th, we're looking for a whole bunch of people to gather at these events and help us hand out these flyers, not just to the people who gather. We need to do outreach, and we need to reach the people that aren't coming to the event. So that's one of the initiatives happening in support of the Coutts 4 in February.
And then in terms of their contact with the outside world, so they can receive mail, have they been able to receive visitors?
In certain circumstances, yes, but there's hoops to jump through. And they're having, what happened last Saturday actually is there was a special event at Lethbridge. And so one of them was on the phone actually speaking live to the audience, and it was amplified. So that was a really nice moment. I couldn't be there personally, but I was watching online. And so that's good. So there's some connection there to the outside world. You know, they're having a hard time though. It's been almost 2 years. Yeah. And as of February 15th, it'll be over 2 years since they've been incarcerated. So I'm very concerned about them, and I'm listening to a lot of frustrated people. They're so incredibly angry. They wish they could do more. Obviously, there's some fundraising going on. Each of the Coutts 4 men have their own Give, Send, Go, which is at forjustice.ca. So each of them individually have that. So that's one way to support them. Letters is another, but even just spreading the word. Like, more people need to know about this. But like it's been bothering me a lot. So I've actually decided to also host a prayer event. So it's an online Canada-wide prayer event, and people can register. It's tinyurl.com/pray4Coutts4. And we're going to get people together and have prayers and messages. And so I've invited, some different pastors from across Canada to be a part of this Zoom call. And we're going to pray for these men because they're political prisoners.
Yeah, they absolutely are. And when you say that they were charged the day after they were locked up, how did that go down for anyone that's not aware of this, including myself?
They were charged apparently with conspiracy to commit murder because allegedly there were some firearms found. Now, the problem is they haven't gone to trial. 3 of them have gone to bail hearings. They've been denied bail. They haven't gone to trial yet. It's been 2 years. The truth can't even come out. I can't even give you the truth. They won't allow it. So there's all this speculation about what happened or what might have happened. And the people who are, of course, against them have all sorts of speculation. The media hasn't done any favors for them because the media emphasized what they were charged with, conspiracy to commit murder. That's a pretty scary phrase.
Yeah.
So in the public eye, when the public reads something like that, they automatically assume guilty.
Yeah.
So the media has already influenced the perception of the public because the media is perceived as this authority. So there's so much frustration, there's so much anger. And so where I come from personally is I've been working towards the protection and restoration of individual rights and freedoms and responsibilities since February 2021. So I work with various different groups on different projects, and it just felt right that this is the time to help the Coutts 4. I was busy with other stuff before, and so I'm diving in to help with this. And we actually did another event. I was down in Lethbridge, and I was supporting 3 other men who had been charged with regards to some stuff that had happened at Coutts because they were in leadership roles during the event at Coutts. Now they weren't in jail, but they had been charged and they had to go to court that day. So I was down in Lethbridge supporting them for their event. I brought my sound system. We had some speeches outside of Lethbridge Courthouse. Of course, there was some talk of the Coutts 4 as well. And so what's amazing is this a massive amount of support. There's people with bumper stickers now. There's people that have actually giant banners on their properties in southern Alberta, the Coutts 4. And so I'm all about where I feel the solutions are is that we educate and engage enough people, and then we inspire them to action. And then they put pressure on the decision makers here. So for example, the Crown prosecutor could back down and say, yeah, let them have bail so that they can prepare their cases, and rather than keep them until the court hearing, until trial. So where I'm at is about igniting the people. That's my thing.
Yeah. And it absolutely needs to happen. And then what is the name of the man acting or woman acting as Crown prosecutor?
I don't have that name. And one person I was chatting with suggested we don't give it out, but he did provide the email address that you could reach him. So it doesn't have his name on it, but it's the Crown Prosecutor's office. And it's on one of the Coutts posters. If you'd like me to share the poster, I can.
Yeah, the reason that I ask is because right now there is an entity known as the Crown Prosecutor that is being protected in his anonymity because then there's no liability, which means the ability to lie remains. Once the man is named or woman is named in their private capacity, they're no longer covered by the public thing, which is the res publica, which is what the corporation and all of its nation states under it, which are corporations in and of themselves, that's what the liability protection insurance covers. Think of it like an umbrella that goes over top of everyone covered by the suits that they're wearing when acting on behalf of the Crown Courts, cops, or councils. So when we're allowing the liability protection to remain in place, they're covered, but they still leave the public thing or their office in order to go home and love their family and have a life separate from that in their private life. Well, once they're on notice in their private capacity, then even when they traipse into the public to hold an office, they're still on notice in their private capacity, which means that if the man wasn't involved, he has no standing in the matter, which means he has no right to speak. And if he's causing these men harm, which he is, I'm presuming it's a he, but that it may not be too. But I'm just for use of the pronoun he, in this instance, I'm just going to presume it's a man. But I'm saying this because this is the reason that we're in this state generally, I believe. Because we've been so conditioned to believe the public thing has our best interest at heart, that we're stepping into it and then we're protected by it. And then everyone that doesn't agree with it gets pushed out. Because, like you said, the media portrayed the men that are locked up in a certain way. That's only possible because the media is part of the ideological state apparatus that's being reinforced by the cops, courts, and councils underneath of them that give them their power. So it's just the vicious cycle that continues when anybody is allowed to remain in their public capacity. Capacity and standing and status are everything within the public. And it's relevant too in the private, because if there is no standing, there's no right to speak other than hearsay, which is heresy within the church. So when we start to break it down to the ridiculous in this way, it's literally, have you ever heard the expression mixed war?
No.
The mixed war is between the public and private. So on one side is private and the other is public, which is the equivalent of David and Goliath. So it's essentially us facing off with the public beast that then offices can be replaced and figureheads holding the office can be replaced, and the enemy doesn't die because we're all replaceable when we are cogs within the cognition of the engine that we're empowering with our energy. So my best offering, because I spoke with the man that helped me deal with a summons for speaking at a rally in 2021, and it got stayed along with the others from that day, but mine was pulled forward to be dismissed or stayed in September 21st, 2022. And the all of that process helped me better understand all of what I'm now sharing. But I spoke with the man that helped me, who only deals with people in a private one-on-one way, because that's how the group think doesn't interfere with the ability to do what's best for the one that's actually in the situation that they're facing. And so he actually wrote up a notice that could be used to help these men remaining in our private capacity and making claims. Because once claims have been made and people are on notice in their private capacity, who says I don't have the rights that are claimed here? Because then a real man or woman has to actually say they don't have the rights that are being claimed. So, how to protect oneself and property from loss and harm to others? I claim I identify any man or woman that implies charges or obligations or implied authority, confinement over me. So that means they have to identify themselves. And then everyone who is holding them in an unlawful fashion, such as what is happening, are liable, responsible, and accountable for their choice to participate in a crime. I make known by notification to anyone implied in step 1 who I am, how I stand as a self-governing man, and my lawful reason why I am innocent or why I believe I cannot be lawfully convicted. And lawful reason is lawful excuse. I am a man commonly known as, they put their name, and I am here in my private capacity as a self-governing man. I waive no rights by participating in this courtroom. So like what you did with your case, that is saying, I didn't get my rights from a piece of paper or legislation written by any kind of authority. I have rights, I claim rights, and then I stand on my claims, is the retraining process we all need to go through. And then I make known my claimable rights to the one that wronged me. A claimable right is one I intend to say in a court on a record. I then give anyone involved the chance to prove otherwise by superior claim on the record. If I get no response, then my claims stand as true. My rights come from my beliefs that I claim that no one can claim otherwise by superior claim. So if we have the highest claim to the truth, then only another man or woman that would be able to share a competing truth would be able to contest our claim. And if they can't or don't want to, because of how that would implicate them in their private capacity once on notice in that capacity, then it's their choice whether they're going to keep playing ball for the devil, being lived backwards, or whether they're going to act honorably and do what is right, which is what you're calling for and everyone else that is involved in this matter. And then I start by claiming I am innocent until proven otherwise, and all my herein claims stand as true until proven otherwise in a competent court of law. I must be respected as any other innocent man or woman and would be until proven otherwise. No one has the right to judge or convict another man or woman other than in a fair and open hearing or trial. No one providing public service or any other implied authority has a right to pass judgment or presume I am not innocent outside of a fair hearing or trial. And then how to claim a right in court? The example given, before I can receive a fair hearing or trial, I must establish my rights on the record. So I believe I have a right to settle the implied claims or charges against me directly with anyone making claims or believing charges against me withstanding firsthand knowledge to do so. Is there any man or woman involved in this matter claiming I don't have that right? Let the record show no man or woman responded if they don't. And that literally would protect these men for the first time.
Wow. So is that a tool, like, is that something you suggest is presented the
Yeah.
next time each
These
man is in court?
well, it's even before court, because essentially the novel way to actually do this is to send claims ahead of time. So this would have to get to the men. They would need to fully comprehend it and then be able to send a copy to anyone who would be related to this matter and have a challenge. Someone would have to challenge it, or else they have to honor it, because if no one will, then how is it? I say that we get the name of every man and woman working at the jail where they're being held. Every single man and woman that comes near them and does not help them is aiding and abetting treason. These men are being wrongfully held. That is not okay. No one believes, no one would disagree with that, I can't suggest. And if there is a man or woman that is working on behalf of the institution that wants to help, they're bound, so long as it's by their office, by their uniform. They get their power from the position they hold. If they defy the position or the ones they get their position from, then they're as fruct as we are. And fruct is actually part of usufruct. So it's the extracting of fruits from someone else's labor. So it's usufruct is the usus, fructus, and abusus elements. And basically it's the ability to use someone else's property. Fructus is the ability to use and profit off of the use of someone else's property. And then abusus is when abuse is introduced into the demolition or destruction of someone else's property. It's actually,
mm-hmm. So do you have, is there a story you can share about someone who used this approach and they had some success?
That claim specifically, or that notice, was written specifically for the men after I said, I'm doing a call with Benita tomorrow. And my lawman said, okay, well, let me look at it and then write up what he could find. In my own case, I stood as a woman in my private capacity with all common law rights reserved at all times. And common law is the unwritten, uncapitalized version. So that's unspecified. As creatives, we can draw from that which is unwritten until it's been written and limited. And then we're limited to what has already been written because we're drawn into the public thing. Until we're drawn into the public, we can draw from the private. Does that make sense?
Well, somewhat, but I'm curious to know that if let's say someone was having these legal troubles and they had already engaged the services of a lawyer, can they still turn around and take this alternative approach or no?
Absolutely. So the
Okay.
benefit of common law in its unwritten, uncapitalized, and unspecified version, which does not include British common law or King's common law or common hyphen law, which are all specifications of the unwritten. The unwritten is the original. Anything that has been copied then becomes aboriginal, which is from or away from what was original, is what the prefix ab means. Does that make sense?
Somewhat. It's still a bit over my head. I mean, I shared with you that I had one experience where I used an argument slightly similar to what you presented, but that was only the one time. Any other time that I've received a speeding ticket or something, I couldn't figure out the right words and I had to pay the ticket.
Right.
I wish I'd met you sooner.
Well, honestly, it's all about choosing your battles, and some of the smaller ones sometimes, you get dragged, it gets dragged out because the legal system is based on arguments. And that if you're arguing, you're at war. You've already agreed to the waters that we're then implied to be in. Whereas when to go back to your question about if they've already engaged a legal professional to act on their behalf, deeming themselves then a third party to their own affair, because the public thing is the public affair. And once you're allowing an agent to speak for you, you're moved to a third person perspective because someone else is telling your story. You can always step back into your private capacity and make claims to right wrongs, which is why anyone that thinks the day of reckoning is going to wait until the end of our lives is missing the point. That we're the ones that actually call for the day of reckoning now by saying that regardless of what's gone on so far, we are calling for justice now, but not letting it be served just as cold as ice. Now we're saying these are my requirements, which requires an order within the legal system because the legal system uses legalese and we use English. They just look the same, but one has different meanings than the other. So you
Well,
could.
you mentioned Day of Reckoning, and I know this lady, and she's rather religious, and she sees the situation we're in, and what reassures her is her belief that Jesus is coming, and that um that'll be a day of reckoning, so to speak, and that the bad people will be punished and the good people will be rewarded. I think that's her interpretation. Anyways, she has said this to me on more than one occasion. And when she shares that message with me, I get kind of frustrated because I see it differently. And so one time I finally, I said to her, I kind of blew up a little bit and I said, don't you get it? We are the body of Christ. We are his hands and fingers and arms and legs and toes. We are here to do his work. It's not about waiting for him. We are the body of Christ. We are the righteous. We are the good. We are the love. We are to change this world and make it the way it should be by holding those who've done wrong accountable. And she didn't know what to say when I stated that, but I feel like that somewhat correlates to what you're communicating.
Yeah, absolutely. This is precisely the point. Religion has been used as part of the ISAs from the very beginning. So the ideologies that are promoted within the Bible, from what I understand, it was commissioned around the same time that the Justinian Codex was, which is what the legal fiction is based off of. And when I say legal fiction, I mean the legal system. It's just then to say what's the difference between a legal fiction and an illegal fiction, except for the fiction that is deemed okay or nay.
Well, legal fiction. So we talked earlier about the rules of something are the rules we agree to.
Right.
So let's just pretend we lived in the country and we lived on a country road and you have an acreage a half mile that way. My acreage is here. There's another acreage a half mile that way. And there's this stretch of road for 4 miles. Technically in the country, the max speed on these roads is supposed to be 80 kilometers per hour. Okay, but let's pretend what our neighbor down the road is a speed demon and he's always driving 120. He loves to whip from the highway to his house so fast. Okay. If you and I don't have an issue with that, and we don't care that he blasts past us at 120 kilometers per hour, we've in a sense agreed to a new set of rules in our neighborhood. You know, officially, that sign says it's only 80 kilometers per hour. He's driving 120. We've chosen to go whatever. We don't complain. So we've, in a sense, agreed to a new set of rules. And if, let's say, one of the neighbors didn't like it that he's driving so fast, well, then they could call it in and some sort of authoritative individual could come out and give him a ticket or give him a talking to and discourage him and make him suggest he drive the speed limit. So I look at these rules. Maybe it's because I grew up without too much structure. And so I have this belief that there are rules, but we can bend them, we can break them. I've heard a few people say rules are meant to be broken, right? You hear that in the movies. And I have done that on many occasions. I have bent or broken a rule and gotten away with it. I've been so lucky to get away with it so many times. And then there's other times I get caught and I get a speeding ticket. But I really like what you're sharing here. I'm learning so much, and I'm hopeful later on that you can email me some of these words and phrases and resources. And what I could do for you, if you like, is I can pass it along to people, see if they want to make use of it, see if they want to contact you and learn more.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, even what you're saying about driving, if the man that is speeding past your acreage is not conducting commerce or commercial purposes as to why they were on the road in the first place, technically he's just traveling. So the status of driver doesn't even apply to one that is not conducting commercial activity.
Okay, so if he's just traveling, he's not obligated to follow the same set of rules?
Well, it's a different jurisdiction because only drivers are bound to driver's license requirements and that all the rules that go with a driver's license. License being lying to your senses. So in order to get
Okay, so when they write the ticket, though, they're often referring to operating a motor vehicle. So they're not always saying driving, they're saying operating a motor vehicle on the ticket. So can you address that?
it's jurisdictionally, it has to do with whether you're actually conducting commerce or not, from my understanding. So essentially, if whatever the officer says, they're not an officer, they're a man or woman holding a position that's actually trespassing on our right to travel freely. So if they're infringing on our ability to travel freely, they're going to rope us into their jurisdiction by getting our last name, which is our legal name, which is part of the legal fiction. They're going to call for our driver's license, which will then allow them to gain authority because when we hand over the paperwork that is all they actually have call to or claim to, because we're holding it and then they're asking for it, we're just implied to be that which we're handing over, which isn't the truth. We've just gotten confused with the counterfeit version that is implied to be us and where we stop and the public thing begins. Does that make sense?
Somewhat. I really want to see you on a debate or arguing in court. It would be entertaining to watch you have this back and forth with a lawyer or a crown prosecutor or a judge. You know so much.
I don't, they, no one sworn to the bar would be willing to likely do that. I wouldn't suspect because their oath is to protect it. So they have to protect the public thing, which means that they know the rules. And from what I understand, essentially we can gain information honestly or we can gain it professionally, which is essentially not to say it's not honest to get it professionally because that's the system that we've all been trained to want to work within. But in order to get the information, you gain secrets once you're part of the position. You need certain information in order to do your job. So you get access to secrets that you're then not allowed to share outside of the society where you gained those secrets. Otherwise, stitches get, or rats get, or what is it? Stitches get, or rats get stitches and wind up in ditches, they say, right? Like that whole concept of, if you squeal, then if you tell other people that aren't supposed to know about these secrets, then you gained them because you joined our society. We gave you the power, we can take it away from you. So it very much is based on, it's all bullying. And it's the modern day witch hunt legalized and normalized from my experience in 2019 when I got locked up for reporting a crime, in that the system is corrupt, the police are in on it, and there must be some good ones, and I'm here to help bring peace to this world, so take me to your leaders. And I wound up locked up for 2.5 weeks. And that was under the Mental Health Act, which I never expected or even considered being a possibility for myself, because I hadn't done anything wrong. But ultimately, if we actually look back historically, when people went against the church or the state, the goons come out, or the henchmen, or the mob, or whatever society gets assigned that individual, which is not divisible from the group, because by essence of being individual, that means there is a group body from which you're separate. So all of these terms, it comes down to the details, which is where the devil was always said to be.
You've got me thinking about another deception. I mean, we've talked a lot about deception of authority, deception of law, deception of rules. There's another deception going on, and I believe that too many people are being deceived, and they're being groomed into dependency.
Yeah.
And they're being taught from a young age this dependency mentality, whether it's on the government or on their parents, and it's being perpetuated. And it's this mindset. I come from a different background. My father was an entrepreneur. I became an entrepreneur. And to me, the mindset is basically, I don't get anything unless I earn it. That's the way it is. I got to go out and earn it, and I better make sure I make enough money so I pay my expenses. So I better have a handle on my expenses. And that was the way I grew up, and that's the way I was, into my 20s. But as I got older, I started meeting these people with a completely different mindset from whatever background they came from. And they started talking, in a sense, about entitlements. One guy I met said to me, he says, yeah, well, I'm going to work, this many months, and then I'm going to go on Pogey, and I'll be on Pogey for this many months, and then I'll go back to work. And he's perfectly capable of working. He's a healthy man. And I said, well, why would you go on Pogey? Why would you go on this employment insurance? And what he said was, well, you pay into it, you're entitled to draw from it. That was his mindset. And I at that time disagreed with that, because I'm of the belief, hey, we should work, we should pay our bills, buy our vehicle, try to be financially independent and not depend on any of those handouts. Because as soon as you depend on a handout, any handout, you, I believe, are now somewhat subject to that. If you're dependent, you are subject to, and you become a slave. And so when the vaccine rules came out, and they said, oh, you can't eat in this restaurant unless you're vaccinated. I got kicked out of a restaurant. I didn't have a vaccine pass. I started wondering, well, there's these people that, rely on their pensions or their age, their welfare, their employment insurance. How long is it going to be before they can't collect any of those until they show proof of vaccination, right? Like the government, there's all these rules, and these people in so-called positions of authority are getting away with imposing this stuff on us. and doing things to the Coutts 4, incarcerating them because they were at a protest, incarcerating them for 2 years. And to me, that is also intimidation. They are attempting to scare people like you and me from getting out there and speaking the truth and protesting or doing whatever it is we need to do, because we might be incarcerated, because look, those guys were incarcerated, others have been incarcerated. And so there's this intimidation going on that they're attempting. And although we don't have the Coutts 4 released yet, I'm optimistic about the coming months, because there are so many Canadians now aware of the situation. Tucker Carlson helped make people internationally aware of this situation. And I feel that it's about the people power. So it's not enough if you stand up and I stand up. That's not enough. We need at least 60% to stand up. Doesn't even have to be 100%. If we can get 60, we win. That's what I feel. And so that's why I work so hard on awareness, whether it's about the Coutts 4 or others. I work on these awareness campaigns. I work on spreading the word. And also I try not to do it in such a way where people lose hope, though, because I want them to have this hope that we can get through. And I can see that you do that too. You present like, hey, there's a solution to that. There's a solution to this. And if we present it in such a way where we give people hope, well, then they're more inclined to like get on board and take action. And that's what we need, is more people doing that. There's still too many people holding back. They know the truth, but they're still holding back. They're not yet taking action. So we got to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love your passion and enthusiasm and everything that you've been doing. We've been on Freedom Rising calls for 3 years now, and you're always on them, and I sometimes pop onto them. But what you're saying is so true, because dependency is the way that hands can be forced once the hands become dependent. And that was my experience when I got locked up and was seeing patterns energetically. I recognized that that was a huge piece of it. And even Carolyn Mace talks about woundology being a way that we connect through our wounds. And so problems have actually become a currency, because that's how we connect with people nowadays. It's like, oh, you tell me about your charges, and then I can tell you about my charges. And then
Victimhood mentality.
yeah, literally, victimhood is what I call it, high rose prism. And that's what the public thing is. I refer to it as part of the theory that I've created called high rose prism, where essentially once we're in the public thing, the king is on top, the knight is the agent that then gets to direct the debtor, who is the pawn. And we're essentially moved on this triangle within the front face of this prism, where the chessboard is on the bottom. And if you're a chess player, you know the queen would be the backside of the king, the bishop would be the backside of the knight, and then the rook or castle would be the backside of the pawn. And so that's kind of a theory I can break down in another time. But within that, if you flip it, the victim's at the bottom looking up to the rescuer to save them from the punisher. And that's Cartman's drama triangle. That is an old theory. It's not old specifically, but I don't remember when he coined it. But when we're in the victim triangle, we're in the prism. We're looking for a savior to save us from those that are hurting us. And then we can't do anything because we're so small, which is the whole point of the mixed war. We're facing off against a whole public office and all of its officers that work within it. And it's very easy to get down and out. And when you say about needing even 60%, what if we actually leveled the playing field, which is what the course is called, by simply all stepping into our private capacity, with all common law rights reserved at all times, putting every other man and woman on notice in their private capacity that any harm, loss, or fraud caused to any other man or woman is not okay. And once they're on notice that their public actions are still, they're still responsible for in their private capacity, I believe the game changes.
I like how you think. I really do. You want to empower more people. I feel like you should be hosting workshops at least once a week. Is that what you would consider doing?
Yeah, I've been working on getting the course together and it's taken 2 months instead of one. And I just did this retreat and I've got to move some things around. But yes, this is what needs to happen. And having more support and, getting out of my own way in order to say, okay, because I don't have all the answers. I have offerings and there are a lot of other people that have really important information and insights to add as well, which is why doing a group call is so valuable. It's just we all can only do what we can do, and we all deal with the doubts and all of the insecurities and everything else that comes up when we're trying to get it in order and we think it all needs to be together, but ultimately we need to be together. So doing group calls, I appreciate the prompt, and I will be starting in February. I was going to be launching my Weaving Intentional Inner Webs podcast, which is, I think, the perfect platform to be able to do exactly that. So I just need to fast track what I'm doing. But within the next couple weeks, I will be getting it posted to my meetup group under Peaceful Inner Warriors United to be able to do so. Thank you for the
That's yeah, yeah, that's exciting. And one of the things I think would help with your momentum is success stories where people have used this material and then they've had successes. Another thing I'd like to mention is I was listening to a presenter some time ago at a event, and it was a political event. And one of the things he said was that no one is coming to save you. And he said this and he kind of yelled at the audience a little bit. He said, no one is coming to save you. If you want things to change, you have to do it yourself. So he really ignited that audience because there are some people with that attitude. They don't even think they're victims, but they've got kind of a victim attitude. And they sort of think, oh, well, things will change when so-and-so does that, or so-and-so does that, or when so-and-so's arrested by so-and-so, that's when things will change. That's what needs to happen. But they don't often enough look at themselves and go, what can I do? What can I do? What action can I take? And I look at everybody I meet, including the people I've met through the Freedom Network, and I just keep thinking, well, there's everybody could do a little bit more. You could do a little bit more. And you could, what's even more important than that of what you do, it's you inspiring someone else. So for example, I'm planning to go speak to my town council on February 12th. So I have to have all my stuff organized by February 7th because I have to submit it almost a week in advance and then speak at this council meeting. And I'm a bit anxious about it because I want to present regarding the United Nations meddling in municipal policies. And then I'm planning, so no matter what the outcome is of the event, like in my mind, I want to change hearts and minds, but maybe I won't be successful. Depends on how you look at success, though, because sometimes success is at least trying. And the fact that you try and you push back against this authority in some way, and then someone hears your story of pushing back, whether you succeed or fail, you might be inspiring someone else to push back. So it's almost like we have to do it. We have to, because this isn't just me and this isn't just you. There's other people watching and I hope being inspired, and they're going to push back in different ways too.
Yes, I love your energy and enthusiasm. And I often say the character Jesus in the book, which was not the man's name while he lived, which is a side point. But if you break the word down, Jesus, and then you put an I in there, you get je suis.
I am.
I am in French, right? The je suis is the I am that I am. And if we start to understand, a lot of stories have been manipulated for the sake of the ideology that the hegemonic priesthood are supporting, which hegemony is the dominant culture, which is what upholds the ISAs, RSAs, and corporations underneath of that. So if we start to see it as an hegemonic priesthood, which is a term I coined in this course, then we start to see Hiero's Prism as Hiero being a story that Xenophon, a Greek military commander, wrote about a tyrant whose life was no better off than the people that he was overseeing, who he only had his position because of them. So he needed to keep them disempowered and send his villains into their lives to be villains for them to stay disempowered. And that's why Hiero's Prison requires the victim triangle to self-perpetuate itself.
Yeah, that whole mentality about wait for the savior, that really bothers me. I save yourself, right? And you know, I've been there. I've been on the side of the road, stuck with my vehicle. In one case, it was a flat tire, and on previous occasions, I usually just wave at traffic. Somebody stops to help me, but on one particular day, nobody stopped it. I had to figure out how to change that tire, and it was a very stressful time, and I missed an important appointment because of it. But at the same time, when you, instead of waiting for the savior, when you figure out how to save yourself, that feeling of I did it, I figured it out, I overcame, I saw my fear, but I went through it anyway. That's better than being saved.
Yes.
It's so much better to figure it out on your own. And I would love to empower more people to this, because there are still some people waiting.
Yeah. Yeah, there are, and I think when people see ones like us coming together at 303, that it is time for us to take a stand, to put men and women on notice in their private capacity and let them know that even when acting on behalf of the public, which is another construct, the public, like what's the public other than the construct in our mind if we actually think about it? These are the constructs that keep getting us tripped up because we the people, like who is we the people, right? And then who, as in the agency, who's the who? And then you're in Whoville. And it's really crazy. So instead of going into Whoville, take names, make claims in our private capacity where everyone has a responsibility to act with a conscience instead of the con of science with a dollar sign through the S. And then we start to get real again, which is what's required. And that's when we stop bullying one another because we were taught about bullying in school. We just didn't realize it was going to be a workplace phenomenon and the rest of our life situation until people had to pay in their private capacity. And I think the game changes when we do that.
You know what, to me that's another manipulation. So they do these programs where it's, you know, anti-bullying, you know, quit being a bully, but at the same time they're teaching victimhood. Yeah. They're teaching victimhood. They're saying if you're bullied, don't stand up for yourself. Whatever you do, don't stand up for yourself. Go tell a teacher. If you're bullied, oh well, we better get you a safe space. And to me the absolute opposite should be taught. We need to be teaching resilience, which means maybe you take a hit, you fall down, you get up again, you climb the tree, you fall out, you scrape your knee, you climb it again. That's living. Whereas this whole, oh, so and so hurt my feelings, yeah, we need to transcend this. And tough people like you and me, we could teach others.
Absolutely. I love it. Well, if you focus on anti anything, you get more of that which you're focused on because fire only grows fire. So anti-bullying focuses on bullying. If we focus on what the opposite of that would be and actually create a community culture of care, we step out of the insanity of a death cult and step back into one that is life affirming instead.
I completely agree with you. And to prove your point, there's a website called Anti-Hate, and all it does is perpetuate hate. With regards to the Coutts 4, there's a couple of websites. So one is coutts4.ca. Another one is forjustice.ca. And I just love the name of that website, forjustice.ca, because I think what they're trying to do is focus on the outcome we want. We want justice. We're not yet getting justice, but we focus on the outcome we want. And the more we focus on that, we put our energy on that, and then we get a whole bunch of other people focusing on that, then that gives that outcome more power and a greater likelihood, just like the Freedom Convoy.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I am grateful that you reached out about connecting on this important topic today, and I hope that those watching were able to take away some key points. I'll get you to share the links so that I can put that into the description of the video as well after the fact. And it was an absolute pleasure to connect with an absolute powerhouse like yourself, Benita, today. Thank you so much. Is there any final message that you'd like to say before we close off?
Remember February 15th, which is events happening across Canada at courthouses, and we're distributing material. But also mark your calendars for February 25th, and that's the National Prayer Call. tinyurl.com/pray4Coutts4 with the number 4s. And so I'm hopeful you'll share the posters at some point for all of those. And I just really want to encourage everybody to support these events in whatever way you can.
Beautiful. Thank you, Benita.
What I can share with you from my personal experience is that back in 2020-21, I received 10 tickets simply for exercising our constitutional right to protest. So $1,200 tickets times 10 was $12,000.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, the Crown prosecutor said to me that if I'm found guilty of this, each ticket could go up to a penalty of $100,000. So here I am facing a possible penalty of $1 million in fines. So that was in June of 2021. And I was ready to cry because I thought the Crown prosecutor was telling the truth. Well, then time goes by and I went to court once a month, and I didn't know anything of what you're telling me, but I knew in my heart what was right and what was wrong. And somebody said to me, whatever you do, don't plead, because as soon as you plead, you're stepping into their jurisdiction. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but you're stepping into their playground, so to speak. So I refused to plead on the grounds that the tickets are invalid. They never should have been issued to me. Mm-hmm. So we had court once a month for a year by phone because of course COVID rules. Mm-hmm. And at the December court meeting, apparently there were 3 constitutional lawyers there with the judge on this phone call with me. And I remember these words coming out of me, and it just sort of just came out of me. But the words that came out were very similar to, I have rights simply because I was born. Legislation and the Constitution and the Charter and the Bill of Rights, those are all intended to protect my rights, but they don't actually give me my rights. Mm-hmm. I have rights simply because I was born. I'm a woman. I have eyes to see and ears to hear, and I have these inalienable rights. And so I presented this to these constitutional lawyers back in December of 2021, and the Crown prosecutor and the judge and everyone, and they were just silent for several seconds. So I don't know if that relates to what you're talking about. It was more so my intuition talking about what was right and wrong. Yeah. But anyway, the outcome of that was on June 22nd of 2022, all charges were withdrawn. I went to court that day. The Crown prosecutor said, all charges withdrawn. I said to the judge, may I make a statement to the court? Because I had some words prepared. The judge declined. But then outside the courthouse, I connected with a media representative, and that was even better, to make a statement to the media representative, because then part of my statement made it into the local paper. So I was pretty pleased for that. And I was hopeful that more people were inspired by my story since I endured.
Mm-hmm. Well, fantastic. And I'm very glad that you did, Benita, because we need people to stand up for ourselves and to not let legal authorities or representatives represent us as something other than we are, which is the person that we're implied surety for. And once we allow an agent to speak for us, then we're deemed a ward of our own estate and the trust. That's the Z of how we're incorporated within the public thing. So what you did is to say you were born, not birthed. Birthing is a movement of admiralty maritime law jurisdiction, because when you plead, you're declaring war essentially, because you're saying by guilty or not guilty, both of those are in warring jurisdictions. So I am innocent of any wrongdoing is the equivalent, but you're claiming innocence, which means you are not battling, which means that they have no jurisdiction because you haven't agreed to the duel.
Well, I like what you said. A lot of that sounds right. And I think I was following your advice without even knowing it. It was intuition, though.
Yeah. Well, your intuition is the teacher your soul hired ahead of time to guide you through this life. So it absolutely did right. And you're correct in saying that your rights don't come from a piece of paper or legislation, because when we're born, inalienable, inalienable has a lien in it. So if we're trying to say that our rights come from any legislation, we're saying that legislation is above us. But you're saying that your rights are God given or given by the creator that we all come from, regardless of what title we put onto it, means that we haven't agreed to the grantor of domain within a specific house, which is what the courts are playing in.
You know, this is very interesting, because if you think about a card game, let's say, I play one called Spite and Malice. And when I go to one house and I play Spite and Malice, the hostess there plays by a certain set of rules. But when I go to another house and play Spite and Malice, the host there might play by a different set of rules. So somebody might have kings are wild, jokers are wild. The other one is we don't play with jokers, but sevens can be a wild card. So it's just really interesting that I might think I know how to play this game.
Yes.
But they play it different. But because I want to play in their playhouse, so to speak, I choose to go by their rules, or I talk them into going by my rules. But then I go to the different other house and there's a different set of rules. So really, are there no rules, or are rules simply what we agree to?
Mi casa es su casa. My house is your house is the premise that we're used to in a Spanish vernacular. But it essentially is exactly what you're saying, in that we're still under manorialism. It just shifted into feudalism. And that's how now we're feuding with families specifically, which is the house that we're born into. And then we can be transferred to a different family through the marriage from one family where the father places the bride's hand into the hand of her betrothed, who then she takes the last name of, right? So the last name follows the lineage of the ruler or the keeper of the house. And that's all about the manner that we're in. So exactly what you're saying with the game you're playing, whoever's house it is, it's their rules. If I came into your house and started telling you what to do in your house, you would promptly either tell me to leave or adjust my course, essentially, right? That's
right. But it's also an intimidation game, because if you think about it, let's say I'm in my house and you come over and I'm playing the card game wrong, and then you correct me. And it might be my house and I played the card game that way for years, but you come in and say with authority, no, this is actually how you're supposed to do it. Well, even though it's my house, I might actually choose to go by your guidance just because you speak with so much authority. And this is what I find is happening right now, is people are sort of getting suckered in because someone with so-called authority or perceived authority is telling them what to do and how to do it. So take Chris Sky, for example. One of the first videos I saw of him was he was walking through an airport, and it appeared that security wasn't going to let him through. They were behaving in this authoritative manner, saying, you can't come through. And he said, I have every right to enter my country. This is the place of my birth. I have every right. And he walked right through, and they didn't stop him. And so I look at that and I go, okay, there's all this authority around us and we perceive it as authority, but how many times is it a deception that they're just playing a role and we're playing along? We're allowing that to happen. And so a phrase I like is, you have no authority here, or this is out of your jurisdiction. Now, I haven't had to use that lately, but like, I have a lot of respect for people, and to an extent I have a respect for authority, but I'm recognizing that there are times, you know, you're glad somebody authoritative comes around, and you know, because let's say there's people in the room and they're fighting, so it's good if someone authoritative comes around and shuts that down, like a bouncer in a bar or a policeman comes around. That's good, right? But there's other times these people in positions of authority or perceived authority, they're abusing their privilege. And we, more of us, need to stand up to that. That we've got to find the strength inside us, the strength from God, the strength from one another, and we've got to stand up to that. And someone like you who can give us the right words to say in those difficult moments, like this is perfect. I feel like I should be taking your course and writing a bunch of notes and trying to memorize all these phrases. This is so useful.
Well, it is incredibly useful, and it's very much out of common knowledge at this point because it's so alternative, and we're living within a system that is self-sustaining. So, something that I talk about in there that I've come to understand is about ideological state apparatuses, which is the church, schools, it's social media, it's sports, every form of cultural influence becomes the apparatus that adults play in. Because as kids, we played in the playgrounds. And now we've moved into playing on the ideas that are then formed, which create the illusion of a state. And then we create a whole bunch of things to go with that. But underneath of those ISAs is the acronym that ideological state apparatuses has, are repressive state apparatuses, which is where the cops, courts, councils are, who receive their power from the ISAs to then reinforce the ISAs. And it becomes that perpetual cycle of reinforcing one another's rule, with the corporations at the bottom being the public-private sector, meaning the private sector of the public domain. And so they are under the influence of the RSAs and ISAs above them, who are all within the same house with a liege lord, top dog, mob boss, whatever you want to call it, at the very top of the state that seems to be governing. It's just right now we're in the process of an attempted corporatocratic takeover, where there is an international government that is now attempting to roll out, which is corporations underneath that have moved on top. And so now the top dog is just changing because the vassal is the holder of title. And the holder of title is the one that claims jurisdiction. We just weren't aware that the holder of title of earth is the Vatican. So that goes way back, which is one of the hidden sides of the law, which is why when someone says, who's the Pope to me? Well, it's the fact that there are hidden hands to the law that are currently at play. So anyone that thinks that the church is not involved doesn't realize the fall of Rome was actually the division of church and state. So the church remained in the east, and then the state became the west. And it was just the divorce and contract, but the players remained the same. Just you can chop off the head of a multi-headed beast, and then the head is replaced when a new figurehead comes into the corporation that's upholding all of this legislation. If that makes sense.
Somewhat. You made me think about where I live. I live in the town of Westlock, Alberta. And I've had some concerns about municipal policies, especially over this past year, because they painted the progressive pride symbol on the street in front of the town hall and the Legion. And then they signed the declaration to join the coalition of inclusive municipalities. And so when I learned of this, I did some research and I realized, oh, this is a United Nations initiative. And so basically my town council just last November 27th has stated that they basically want to take guidance and policies from the United Nations. And so what had happened also in November is the mayor resigned and one of the town councilors resigned. So I decided to run for council, and I participated in the by-election in December and January, and I was not elected, but I still consider my campaign a success because instead of just doing a flyer that said vote Benita, I did a full-size flyer and I exposed how the town of Westlock is allowing local legislation to be influenced by this foreign entity that doesn't have our best interests in mind. And so more people became aware of that. And so what's happening now in the town of Westlock is we have a plebiscite coming up about this rainbow crosswalk because some people put forward a petition for a bylaw on neutrality. And boy, is that a beautiful petition. And I'm so glad it's going to plebiscite now. And I'm very hopeful for the outcome. But I'm actually thinking about speaking at a town council meeting on February 12th, which means I have to get organized. I might need some help from you.
Yeah.
And but I'd like to do a presentation. Now, I'm well aware that those counselors, all 7 of them, they aren't in our mindset. They're, say, further left than you and I are. But I'm determined to at least try to reach them. And I know that when you're in a different mindset from someone, you can't necessarily take them from 0 to 100, but maybe you can take them from 0 to 10, right? Through a discussion, or even 0 to 1, 0 to 2, bring them a step in our direction in knowledge and in understanding. And so that's what I aim to do with town council February 12th. I may make use of the POG primer. I may refer to that. I actually might also refer to the petition Leslyn Lewis has been supporting with regards to Canada getting out of the United Nations. And so these are some tools I'm considering using, and I'm just so grateful we're having this conversation because I'm learning so much.
Yay.